I trusted them with everything. They took it all, but they never expected I'd be the one to take them down. My name is Daniel Harmon. For 15 years, I was one of the most respected hedge fund managers on Wall Street. I built my reputation on calculated risks and ethical investing. My clients trusted me with their futures, and I took that responsibility seriously until 3 years ago, when I made the worst decision of my life. I invested $4.2 million, my entire life savings and portions of my family's money, into Platinum Ascent Capital. Their CEO, Victor Rains, had built what appeared to be a revolutionary algorithmic trading platform that consistently generated 22% annual returns regardless of market conditions. Their financials were impeccable. Their client list was impressive. Their offices in Manhattan's financial district gleamed with success. It was all a lie. 6 months after my investment, Platinum Ascent collapsed overnight. No warning, no explanation. Just an empty office, disconnected phones, and $1.7 billion in investor funds gone. The FBI investigation revealed a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Victor and his executive team had falsified everything: the trading algorithm, the returns, the client testimonials. They'd been siphoning money to offshore accounts for years. I lost everything: my savings, my home, my reputation. Even my marriage couldn't survive the strain. But they made one critical mistake. They stole from the wrong guy. The morning I learned about Platinum Ascent's collapse, I stood in my kitchen, coffee mug shattered on the floor, staring at the news headline on my phone. My hands trembled as I tried calling their office, then my account manager, then Victor himself. Nothing. Within weeks, I was living in a studio apartment. My wife had moved back to her parents' house. The hedge fund I'd built over a decade fired me because of reputational concerns. I was toxic in the industry. I remember sitting on my fold-out couch, scrolling through photos of Victor's $14 million Hampton estate on my laptop. Something inside me shifted that night. The despair crystallized into something harder, colder, more focused. I had nothing left to lose. But I still had my mind, my knowledge, my contacts, and most importantly, time. The first 6 months were pure investigation. I tracked down 47 other victims and created a secure online forum where we could share information. Among us were financial analysts, lawyers, even a former SEC investigator. We pooled what we knew about Platinum Ascent: incorporation documents, promotional materials, banking details, everything. Patterns emerged. Victor and his 3 partners had done this before, under different company names. Always careful, always legally ambiguous. They'd even paid SEC fines once, just a cost of doing business. The most frustrating discovery: they hadn't technically broken enough laws to face serious prison time. They'd constructed their scam with brilliant legal insulation. The money was gone, hidden through a labyrinth of shell companies across 7 countries. Their new venture was already beginning. Through a burner email account, I posed as a potential investor and discovered they were launching a new fund called Quantum Edge Investments in Singapore, targeting Asian markets with the same promises, same scam, new continent, fresh victims. That's when I knew what I had to do. My revenge wouldn't be quick. It couldn't be. It needed to be methodical, comprehensive, and most importantly, legal. I withdrew my last $50,000 and rented a small office in Brooklyn. I pinned photos of Victor and his partners on the wall. Below them, I constructed an organizational chart of their new company, mapping every connection, every vulnerability. Phase 1: information gathering. I hired a freelance forensic accountant I'd worked with years ago. She helped me reconstruct Platinum's entire operation, identifying every regulatory gap they'd exploited. Phase 2: building an army. I reached out to 3 financial journalists who specialized in fraud investigations, feeding them breadcrumbs about Quantum Edge's connection to Platinum. Not enough for a story yet, just enough to get them interested. Next, I contacted former clients of mine who now worked at major Asian investment banks. I sent them anonymized data showing the statistical impossibility of Quantum Edge's promised returns. Not illegal, just enough to raise serious doubts. Phase 3. Positioning myself. Using a former colleague as a front, I purchased a small but meaningful position in Quantum Edge, enough to gain access to shareholder meetings and financial statements. Meanwhile, I created a detailed dossier on each executive's personal life. Victor had a gambling problem he hid from investors. CFO Michael Weitz had been quietly selling his own company shares while publicly promoting complete confidence in their strategy. COO Lauren Chen had 3 undisclosed conflicts of interest with companies they invested in. I was building a bomb, piece by piece. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and they could recover. Too late, and more innocent investors would be ruined. I waited until their assets under management hit $800 million. Victor had just been featured in Singapore's Business Times as a financial visionary. They were at maximum exposure. Then I lit the match. Day 1 of my attack, I anonymously sent my complete dossier to 16 financial regulatory bodies across Asia. Simultaneously, I launched quantumedgetruth.com, a comprehensive website documenting the connection between platinum and quantum, with financial forensics proving the mathematical impossibility of their returns. By noon, Quantum Edge's share price dipped 3%, a barely noticeable tremor. That evening, my phone rang. Daniel. Victor's voice was calm, almost amused. Interesting website you've put together. My blood froze. I hadn't expected them to identify me so quickly. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. Let's not play games. We should talk like businessmen, perhaps over dinner. The Peninsula Hotel, tomorrow at 8. After hanging up, I paced my apartment for hours. They were trying to buy me off. But the meeting was also an opportunity. At the Peninsula, Victor was waiting in a private dining room. He smiled as I sat down. $2 million, he said without preamble. Cash, untraceable. All we ask is that the website comes down and you sign an NDA. I pretended to consider it. How do I know you'll pay? Half now, half after you sign. I leaned forward. I'll need some time to think about it. You have until tomorrow, Victor replied. After that, things get unpleasant. We have friends too, Daniel. Friends who know where your ex-wife lives in Connecticut. Friends who know about your sister's kids in Portland. As I left the hotel, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. Everything was recorded. The threat was exactly what I needed, proof of extortion to add to my evidence. That night, Phase 2 launched. The financial journalists I'd been feeding information to published their exposés simultaneously. The stories were picked up by Bloomberg, Reuters, and CNBC Asia within hours. The next morning, Quantum Edge shares dropped 18%. Trading was temporarily halted. Then came the counterattack. My apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my laptop was missing. Good thing I'd been working from secure cloud servers. They also launched a legal offensive, filing a defamation lawsuit against John Doe, the anonymous owner of quantumedgetruth.com. The pressure intensified when someone hacked into our victim forum, publishing all our names and contact information. 3 members immediately withdrew, frightened by the exposure. But the machinery was already in motion. Singapore's financial authority announced a formal investigation. 2 major investors publicly pulled their funds. The stock dropped another 24% when trading resumed. Victor called again, this time abandoning all pretense. You're dead, he hissed. You understand that? When this is over, you won't even exist. I smiled to myself. Actually, Victor, I recorded that too. The endgame unfolded over 3 brutal weeks. Day by day, Quantum Edge imploded. The regulatory investigations uncovered exactly what we expected. Falsified returns, misappropriated funds, misleading statements to investors. The same playbook as Platinum Ascent. Michael Weitz, the CFO, was the first to break. Facing potential charges in multiple jurisdictions, he agreed to testify against Victor and Lauren. His cooperation unleashed a flood of internal documents showing exactly how they'd orchestrated both schemes. The class action lawsuits began. 16 at first, then 32, then over 100. Their legal costs skyrocketed. I watched from my Brooklyn office as the financial news networks covered Quantum Edge's collapse. Victor had gone from visionary to alleged fraudster in less than a month. The final blow came when authorities in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia simultaneously froze Quantum's assets. They'd recovered nearly $680 million. Not everything, but far more than anyone had recovered from Platinum. I was in a coffee shop when I saw the news alert. Victor had been arrested while trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. The image of him in handcuffs, being led across the tarmac, his perfectly tailored suit now rumpled and stained with sweat. I won't pretend it didn't satisfy something dark within me. But the real victory wasn't watching him fall. It was knowing that thousands of potential victims had been saved from the fate I'd suffered. In the end, I recovered about 60% of my investment through the class action settlement. More than most Platinum victims ever saw. But money was never the primary goal. Victor Rains was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Michael Weitz received 7 years for his cooperation. Lauren Chen is still fighting extradition from Malaysia. The regulatory loopholes they'd exploited have since been closed in multiple countries. New compliance requirements were implemented for algorithmic trading funds. My work with the victim group led to congressional testimony and actual policy changes. I never returned to professional fund management. Instead, I started a nonprofit that educates investors about fraud detection and helps victims of financial scams navigate recovery. People often ask if revenge was worth it. They wonder if I could have simply walked away, rebuilt my life, and found peace some other way. Perhaps, but there's something they don't understand. This wasn't just about making Victor pay. It was about protecting others from him. It was about using my knowledge of the system to fix a broken part of it. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about justice. Would you have taken revenge or walked away? When the system fails, do we have a responsibility to correct it ourselves? I made my choice. I'd make it again. Never underestimate someone with nothing left to lose, except their principles